This story follows a young man named G.O., who is constantly being chased by a group of mysterious thugs. They are acting under the orders of a secret organization that wants to capture G.O. and use him as a research subject. In this world, a small number of humans are born with a rare mutation in their hearts. This mutation grants them special abilities far beyond ordinary humans, and these people are known as mutant hearts. G.O. possesses an ability called the Heart of Resurrection, a power that makes him impossible to kill. No matter how severe his injuries are, his body can heal itself through an incredible regenerative ability. However, G.O. believes his power is nothing more than simple regeneration. He thinks he lacks the extraordinary abilities that other mutants possess, even though the truth is that his power hides a far greater secret. G.O.'s miserable fate continued because of the power he possessed. His extremely slow, regenerative ability caused his body to transform into something horrifying. Once an ordinary human, his appearance had now become similar to a walking skeleton. Because of his terrifying looks, people were frightened whenever they saw him. As a result, G.O. was forced to live as a homeless outcast, with only stray dogs keeping him company on the streets. One day, while searching for food in a dumpster, G.O. noticed a young girl being harassed by a group of delinquents. Even though he himself was starving and trying to find food for the stray dogs, G.O. still chose to help her. However, his horrifying appearance caused the delinquents to panic and run away, believing that G.O. was some kind of ghost. Even the girl he had saved became terrified the moment she saw his face. As the girl was about to leave, she began to rethink the person who had just rescued her. She realized that G.O. was actually someone who possessed a heart mutant. Unable to simply walk away, the girl thanked G.O. and introduced herself as Song Hyeji. After seeing that G.O. was genuinely kind-hearted, Hyeji became curious about his strange appearance and his life as a homeless man. G.O. eventually revealed the truth behind it all. It turned out that G.O. had escaped from a secret research laboratory because of his Heart of Resurrection ability. Ever since childhood, he had been kidnapped and used as a test subject for 10 years inside that laboratory. That was the reason why the thugs sent by the organization kept chasing him. They wanted to capture him and bring him back for further experimentation. Hyeji had once heard rumors about a laboratory that experimented on people with heart mutant abilities. However, most people believed those stories were nothing more than urban legends. Even so, Hyeji understood that uncovering the truth about such an organization was far beyond what an ordinary high school student like her could handle. Instead of focusing on that, she felt more sympathy for G.O.'s tragic condition. Because of that, Hyeji gave G.O. new clothes and even tried to cover up his skeletal appearance with makeup so people would no longer fear him. G.O. felt incredibly grateful because for the first time in a long while, someone had treated him with kindness. To repay her, he offered to help take care of the stray dogs that Hyeji looked after. But amidst that brief happiness, G.O. was reminded once again that he was still a fugitive. He feared that staying near him would only bring danger to Hyeji. Not wanting to drag her deeper into his problems, G.O. decided to leave and continue running from the organization once again. In the middle of his escape, G.O. eventually collapsed from exhaustion and fell asleep. When he woke up, he was once again found by Gamja, the stray dog that had previously been cared for by Hyeji. Not long after, Hyeji appeared, breathing heavily after desperately searching for G.O. ever since he suddenly disappeared. G.O. felt guilty toward Hyeji. He began expressing his worries, saying that if they stayed together, he would only become a burden and could put her life in danger at any moment. However, unlike G.O., who had always lived in loneliness, the kind-hearted and innocent Hyeji believed she should help someone who was suffering. Thanks to the food Hyeji gave him, G.O.'s regenerative ability slowly began to improve. His body gradually started recovering, although G.O. admitted that the process still took an incredibly long time. In truth, there was actually a much faster way for him to restore his body, by absorbing large amounts of blood. But G.O. deliberately kept that secret hidden from Hyeji. After hearing the full story about G.O.'s past, Hyeji suggested asking the police for help. But G.O. immediately refused, fearing that people would be horrified by his appearance. Hyeji then revealed that her older brother worked as a police officer and might be able to help solve his problem. She also confessed that her brother was a heart mutant as well, just like G.O. Hyeji continued reassuring Ji-Oh that there were still people in this world who could be trusted and were willing to help him. Little by little, Ji-Oh's heart began to soften. For the first time after spending so many years running away alone, he decided to accept help from someone else. In the end, Ji-Oh agreed to meet Hyeji's brother and search for a way to finally escape the nightmare that had haunted his life for so long. Before leaving, Ji-Oh said goodbye to Gamja and the other stray dogs who had accompanied him throughout his lonely life on the streets. He also thanked them sincerely because without them, he might never have met Hyeji, the person Ji-Oh considered the kindest human he had ever known, someone who treated him like an ordinary person. However, just as Ji-Oh and Hyeji were about to leave together, the thugs sent by the laboratory finally found them again. Without hesitation, they kidnapped both Ji-Oh and Hyeji. All the fears Ji-Oh had kept buried inside finally became reality. He was overwhelmed with guilt, believing that the person who had shown him kindness was now dragged into danger because of him. In the middle of the tense situation, Gamja and the other stray dogs suddenly appeared, trying to rescue Ji-Oh and Hyeji from the kidnappers. But the thugs saw the stray dogs as nothing more than a nuisance interfering with their mission. Without mercy, they killed Gamja and the rest of the pack. The deaths of his companions triggered an overwhelming rage inside Ji-Oh. For a brief moment, memories of his painful past as a laboratory test subject flooded back into his mind, along with all the kindness Hyeji and the stray dogs had shown him by treating him like a normal human being. Consumed by anger and despair, Ji-Oh began absorbing the blood of the dead dogs. At that moment, his Heart of Resurrection ability reacted in an extreme way. His body started regenerating at an unbelievable speed. Every wound on his body healed completely, and for the first time in a very long time, Ji-Oh returned to his original human appearance. Now fully restored, Ji-Oh was consumed by fury and vengeance. He swore that he would avenge the deaths of his friends and rescue Hyeji from the hands of the organization. Meanwhile, Hyeji, who had been taken to the gang's hideout, slowly began to realize just how horrifying the place truly was. She witnessed many kidnapped people being sold off or even murdered by the group. The boss of the gang then explained to Hyeji that the reason she had been abducted was because Ji-Oh was a fugitive they had been searching for all this time. Not long after, one of his subordinates called to report that the stray dogs had interfered with their operation, causing the kidnapping plan to fall apart. Hearing this, the boss immediately flew into a rage because his men had failed their mission. In his anger, he even decided to kill Hyeji on the spot. But before he could do anything, Ji-Oh, consumed by fury, finally arrived at the gang's hideout. Without hesitation, Ji-Oh launched an assault and brutally took down the thugs who had kidnapped and tried to harm Hyeji. Even while surrounded and showered with bullets from every direction, Ji-Oh kept moving forward. To him, the pain from the gangsters' attacks was nothing compared to the horrifying experiments and torture he had endured for 10 years inside the laboratory. Now that his powers had fully recovered, Ji-Oh was finally able to fight back properly. He could even use the blood around him as a source of energy to accelerate his regeneration. After defeating every thug inside the hideout, Ji-Oh finally walked toward Hyeji. However, Hyeji looked terrified because she no longer recognized Ji-Oh now that he had returned to the appearance of a normal human. After defeating all the thugs, Ji-Oh and Hyeji returned to the place where Gamja and the other stray dogs were lying. When Hyeji saw that the dogs had died, she could do nothing but cry in sorrow. Using his regenerative ability, Ji-Oh tried to heal Gamja with the power of the Heart of Resurrection. However, he eventually realized that his ability only worked on himself and could not save others. In the middle of their grief, a small barking sound suddenly echoed nearby. A puppy emerged from hiding. It turned out to be Gamja's puppy, the same one that had tried to help Ji-Oh and Hyeji during the kidnapping. Since the puppy was now the only one left, Hyeji asked her older brother for permission to let Ji-Oh and the puppy stay temporarily at their house. After arriving at Hyeji's home, Ji-Oh accidentally caught sight of his reflection in a mirror and was immediately shocked to see that his face had completely recovered. Ever since he was kidnapped at the age of 7 and used as a test subject for 10 years, Ji-Oh had never truly known what his real face looked like. Inside the laboratory, his regenerative ability had developed extremely slowly, leaving his body permanently damaged for most of his life. For the first time in years, G.O. was finally able to see the image of a normal human being staring back at him. The kindness Haeji had shown him made G.O. deeply grateful that he had met her after living through endless suffering and torture inside the laboratory. From that moment on, G.O. swore to himself that he would fight against anyone who tried to take away his freedom ever again. Yet even with that determination, his thoughts drifted back to the children who had escaped the laboratory alongside him. G.O. began to wonder, what kind of hardships were his friends facing now after escaping from that horrifying place? The next day, G.O., who was temporarily staying at Yeji's house, could only watch as Yeji left for school like usual. Meanwhile, he decided to take their small dog, Twigim, for a walk around the neighborhood. However, during their walk, G.O. suddenly realized that Twigim had disappeared. Panic quickly set in as he searched everywhere. After looking around for a while, he finally found Twigim near a local school. At first, G.O. only wanted to catch the little dog and bring him back. But without realizing it, he found himself witnessing something he had never experienced before, a normal school life. Students were laughing, playing, and spending time together. It was a completely unfamiliar sight for someone who had spent almost his entire life inside a laboratory. At the same time, shocking news was spreading across the country. The dark truth behind a mutant trafficking organization had finally been exposed to the public. The government even announced a reward of 1 billion won for anyone who reported the location of a mutant. Back to G.O., he found Twigim happily playing with a group of beautiful schoolgirls who were filming TikTok videos. As soon as G.O. appeared, he immediately caught their attention. With his new appearance making him look completely different from before, the girls quickly became interested and started flirting with him. Unfortunately, someone else wasn't happy about that. Taegu, a school troublemaker who secretly liked one of the girls, was instantly filled with jealousy. Unable to accept seeing his crush paying attention to another guy, he decided to embarrass G.O. by kicking a soccer ball directly at him with all his strength. As the ball flew toward him at high speed, G.O. didn't even try to dodge it. Instead, he made sure Twigim was safe and stopped the ball with his own face. G.O.'s calm reaction only made Taegu even more frustrated. Having spent his entire life isolated in a laboratory, G.O. didn't understand things like provocation, pride, or the petty rivalries common among teenagers. After failing to embarrass him, Taegu came up with another plan. He invited G.O. to a hideout where a group of bullies usually gathered, hoping to set him up. It turned out to be a huge mistake. The bullies who intended to intimidate G.O. ended up getting completely beaten down instead. As a heart mutant, G.O. possessed strength far beyond that of an ordinary human. Within moments, every bully was lying on the ground without putting up much of a fight. Witnessing such terrifying power, Taegu became scared out of his mind. He immediately apologized and even pretended to be a dog lover just to make sure G.O. wouldn't get angry at him. Because of his innocent nature, G.O. quickly forgave everything Taegu had done. However, behind that apology, Taegu was still feeling humiliated. His pride as a school delinquent had been crushed. Secretly, he planned to report G.O. to his senior gang members, telling them that G.O. was a mutant who could be sold for a huge amount of money. Even though he still had bad intentions, Taegu invited G.O. to hang out as a form of apology. Together, they visited an arcade, played various games, and later spent time singing at a coin karaoke. There, G.O. chose to sing a children's song. Confused, Taegu asked why he picked that song. With complete honesty, G.O. explained that it was the only song anyone had ever taught him when he was 7 years old. That simple answer left Taegu speechless. For the first time, he realized that G.O. had never experienced a normal childhood. Slowly, sympathy began replacing his hatred. As someone who had grown up in a normal environment and experienced the joys of youth, Taegu started teaching G.O. many things he had never done before. They played games together, laughed together, and spent time like ordinary friends. But their friendship didn't last long. A phone call suddenly came into Taegu's phone. It was the senior gang members he had contacted earlier. Now that he had gotten to know G.O. and learned how tragic his life had been, Taegu had changed his mind. He decided not to hand G.O. over to them. Unfortunately, the seniors didn't accept his decision. Feeling betrayed, they turned their anger toward Taegu. Without mercy, they surrounded him and beat him brutally. Meanwhile, Gio began to worry after waiting too long. Sensing that something was wrong, he went looking for Taegu and eventually found him being beaten by the gang members. That was when Gio learned the truth. Taegu had once intended to betray him and report him as a mutant, but in the end, he chose to protect Gio instead, even if it meant getting beaten to keep his secret safe. For Gio, that was enough. For the first time in his life, someone had truly considered him a friend, and to protect the friend who had accepted him for who he was, Gio finally decided to fight back. The gangsters attacking Taegu had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The defeated thugs were eventually arrested by the police after local residents reported the violent incident. However, before being taken away, the gang leader tried to turn the situation around by informing the police that Gio was a mutant. According to the law, mutants who were not officially registered and lacked legal identification could indeed be detained by the authorities. Just as the situation started becoming dangerous for Gio, Hyeji suddenly arrived in a hurry. After witnessing Gio being bullied at school by Taegu, she immediately chased after him and connected a phone call to someone within the police department. At that moment, it was revealed that Hyeji's older sister was actually Song Hae-in, a police commissioner from the Special Mutant Task Force. With only a single phone call from Song Hae-in, the lower-ranking officers immediately obeyed her orders and stopped the attempt to arrest Gio. In the middle of the tense situation, Gio, curious about the truth, questioned the gang boss about where he would have been sold if he had been captured. He even asked whether he would have been taken back to Hermes Laboratory, the place where he had once been used as an experimental subject. But surprisingly, the gang boss did not recognize the name Hermes Laboratory. He only explained that there was a mysterious broker who managed and controlled the entire mutant trafficking operation. That answer gave Gio a small spark of hope. For the first time in a very long while, Gio began to believe that he might actually be able to find the friends who had escaped the laboratory alongside him years ago. Even though they had all been treated as heart mutant research subjects for years, the children inside Hermes Laboratory were the only people Gio had ever considered true friends. However, when Gio started thinking about chasing this new lead, Hyeji tried to stop him. According to information from her sister, mutant brokers were either extremely dangerous mutants or cruel humans far worse than demons. Even so, after hearing the painful story about Gio and his friends' lives inside the laboratory, both Hyeji and Taegu were deeply moved. In the end, they decided to help Gio search for his scattered friends. Taegu then revealed that he had secretly taken the gang boss's phone earlier. Inside it, he discovered a message showing that the mysterious broker was scheduled to hold a meeting at 7 o'clock that evening. Without wasting any time, Gio immediately prepared himself and headed toward the meeting location arranged between the gang boss and the broker. Now, for the very first time since escaping Hermes Laboratory, Gio finally felt that he had a clear purpose: to find his friends and uncover the dark world hidden behind the mutant trafficking network. Meanwhile, at the broker's hideout, a massive massacre was taking place. A mysterious mutant was brutally slaughtering the broker's subordinates one by one without mercy. That mutant was none other than Lee Chae-won, one of Gio's old friends who had escaped from Hermes Laboratory alongside him in the past. Chae-won possessed an ability called the Heart of the Sword, a power that allowed him to manipulate nearby metal and transform it into deadly blades. After killing the mutant broker and all of his men, Chae-won discovered a message from a potential mutant seller connected to the gang boss's phone. Without anyone realizing it, that message was now linked directly to Gio. It was as if fate itself was slowly bringing the mutants, once separated by tragedy, back together again. Meanwhile, Gio, unaware that the broker's entire organization had already been destroyed by Chae-won, still headed toward the meeting point as planned. With the powers he possessed, Gio believed he could probably escape if things turned dangerous. However, he knew very well that he was not the type of fighter suited for direct combat. Suddenly, a surprise attack was launched toward him. A flying sword shot through the air at incredible speed, barely missing Gio's body. The moment Gio saw someone approaching from the distance while carrying a sword, he immediately assumed the person was the broker and attacked first without hesitation. But just before his punch landed, Gio abruptly stopped himself. He was shocked to realize that the person standing before him was Lee Chae-won, his old friend, the sword mutant. On the other hand, Chae-won failed to recognize Ji-oh at all because his appearance had completely returned to normal. Without hesitation, Chae-won immediately attacked him with extreme caution. However, the moment Ji-oh called out his name, Chae-won became suspicious. He realized that the person before him was likely a heart mutant who had known him for a long time. And not long after, Chae-won finally understood that the man standing in front of him was truly Ji-oh. Even so, Chae-won continued his assault. It turned out that he had carried deep resentment toward Ji-oh ever since the day they escaped from Hermes' laboratory. Back then, when they were surrounded by pursuing forces, Chae-won needed nearby metal in order to use his powers. But at that critical moment, Ji-oh had fled alone without helping him. That misunderstanding left behind anger and emotional scars that Chae-won had never been able to forget. Their battle quickly became intense, causing massive chaos throughout the surrounding area. Realizing that the commotion would attract too much attention, Chae-won eventually stopped fighting. He then invited Ji-oh to his hideout so they could finally talk about the past and clear up the misunderstanding that had haunted them since their escape from Hermes' laboratory. When they finally arrived at the place Chae-won mentioned, Ji-oh was surprised to discover that the hideout was actually just a fast food restaurant where Chae-won worked as the manager. There, accompanied by Hye-ji and Tae-gu, Ji-oh finally began explaining the misunderstanding that had happened during their escape from Hermes' laboratory years ago. Ji-oh revealed that he had never intended to abandon his friends. After spending years as an experimental subject, he had become extremely familiar with different kinds of weapons and explosive devices. During their escape, Ji-oh realized that the guards had planted bombs all around the escape route. That was why he chose to separate from the others and gather the bombs himself so his friends could escape safely. He had even been willing to sacrifice himself in order to give the others a chance to survive. Hearing the truth, Chae-won finally realized that he had misunderstood Ji-oh all along. Ji-oh had never betrayed them. In fact, he was the one who had sacrificed the most for everyone's survival. The anger and resentment Chae-won had carried for years slowly turned into guilt for wrongly judging Ji-oh for so long. After clearing up the misunderstanding, Ji-oh then asked why Chae-won had become involved with mutant brokers. Chae-won explained that he was actually working undercover as a mutant broker in order to help other mutants avoid suffering the same tragic fate that he and Ji-oh once endured. He wanted to protect mutants from human trafficking and the cruel experiments carried out by dark organizations. The innocent and trusting Ji-oh immediately believed his words. He even sincerely told Chae-won that he would gladly help him if another mutant ever needed saving in the future. However, during the trip home, Tae-gu began to feel suspicious. Knowing how easily Ji-oh trusted others, Tae-gu felt that something about Chae-won did not seem right. In his opinion, 3 years was a very long time. A person could completely change during that period and become someone entirely different from the person they once were. That night, Chae-won moved once again to destroy another mutant trafficking organization. However, behind everything, a shocking truth was finally revealed. All this time, Chae-won had actually been working as an agent for Hermes' laboratory, tasked with recapturing the experimental subjects who had escaped. Tae-gu's suspicions had been correct all along. The Chae-won who was once their trusted friend had completely changed. After reuniting with Ji-oh, Chae-won immediately reported his location to Hermes' laboratory and promised to hand Ji-oh over to them. In exchange, he demanded the freedom to obtain whatever he desired. Not long after, Chae-won contacted Ji-oh and asked for his help to rescue a mutant who was supposedly about to be sold. The innocent Ji-oh trusted him without hesitation, never realizing that everything was simply a trap designed to drag him back to the laboratory. Without suspecting anything, Ji-oh headed alone toward the location Chae-won had given him. But the moment he arrived, Ji-oh began sensing that something was wrong. The entire area was surrounded by metal everywhere, the perfect environment for Chae-won's Heart of the Sword ability. That was when Ji-oh realized the truth. It was never a rescue location. It was a battlefield prepared specifically to trap him. Suddenly, a surprise attack was launched at Ji-oh. Countless sword blades struck his body instantly, giving him no chance to dodge. Even while being continuously attacked, Ji-oh still tried persuading Chae-won to stop and come back to his senses. But with every strike aimed at him, Ji-oh could feel Chae-won's genuine intent to kill. At that moment, Ji-oh finally accepted the painful reality that Chae-won truly intended to sell him back to Hermes' laboratory. That realization strengthened G.O.'s determination to fight back. Their battle awakened memories of the past, back when both of them were still test subjects inside Hermes' laboratory. Back then, they had once been forced to fight each other in order to test the abilities of their heart mutants. But instead of seriously battling, they had protected one another. Even amidst the torture and exploitation they suffered, Gio and Chaewon still cared for each other as friends. Ironically, it was Gio's kindness and compassion toward others that eventually made Chaewon disgusted. To Chaewon, emotions and compassion only made people weak. In order to provoke Gio emotionally, Chaewon threatened to hurt Hayeji and Taegu if Gio refused to surrender himself. That threat finally shattered the patience Gio had been holding on to ever since the battle began. Now Gio no longer cared about Chaewon's reasons or their past friendship. The only thing left in his mind was protecting the people who had treated him like a normal human being. As his rage continued to grow, Gio slowly turned the battle around and managed to corner Chaewon, who had once believed himself overwhelmingly superior because of his powers. Although Gio's special ability was nothing more than endless regeneration, years of enduring torture inside the laboratory had unknowingly transformed his body and combat instincts into terrifying weapons. Feeling cornered, Chaewon pushed his powers beyond their limits. Sword blades began erupting from every part of his body, transforming him into a monstrous being covered in deadly weapons. Yet, Gio continued moving forward without fear. His body was pierced repeatedly by swords, but he never stopped advancing, because to Gio, no pain in the world was more unbearable than betrayal from a friend. With unwavering determination, Gio finally defeated Chaewon, a mutant who was far stronger than himself. After defeating Chaewon, a special forces unit suddenly arrived and immediately prepared to arrest both Gio and Chaewon. Seeing them appear, Gio assumed they were agents sent by Hermes' laboratory to capture them once again. Without thinking twice, Gio immediately escaped while carrying Chaewon with him. Even though Chaewon had betrayed him, Gio still could not bear the thought of his old friend being turned back into a test subject and forced to suffer inside the laboratory again. Saving Chaewon was still better than letting him fall back into Hermes' laboratory's hands. However, the special forces were not connected to the laboratory at all. They were actually a special police unit sent to apprehend the mutants responsible for the large-scale destruction. In the middle of the tense situation, someone with authority over the entire operation finally appeared. That person was Song Hyun, Heeji's older sister and a police commissioner from the Special Mutant Division. Hae-in's arrival was actually meant to help Gio escape from the situation. The primary target of their operation was Lee Chaewon, who was officially classified as a wanted criminal, while Gio's case was considered different because he still had no official identity or mutant registration. This immediately sparked an argument between Hae-in and the captain of the special forces. Even though Hae-in held a higher rank, she could not simply take over another department's case without proper justification. With a firm tone, Hae-in finally explained that the case was directly connected to Hermes Laboratory, an organization responsible for conducting dangerous experiments on mutants. Because of the extreme threat level, the case had to be handled directly by the Mutant Division. In the end, it was decided that Chaewon would remain under arrest due to his fugitive status, while Gio would temporarily remain under special supervision. Inside the interrogation room, Hae-in finally met Gio face-to-face for the very first time. Up until now, they had only known about each other through Hyeji's stories, but they had never truly met in person. There, Hae-in began explaining everything she knew about Hermes Laboratory, since she had been personally handling multiple cases connected to the organization for a long time. However, in the middle of the conversation, Gio heard a shocking truth that completely shook him. It turned out that during the escape 3 years ago, Gio was the only one who had truly managed to escape from Hermes Laboratory. All of his other friends had eventually been captured again. That revelation also uncovered the real reason why Chaewon had become a traitor. After escaping back then, Chaewon had returned home too late. Both of his parents had already died, leaving behind only his disabled younger sibling living alone. In that moment of despair, Hermes Laboratory approached Chaewon and offered to take care of his sibling. But in exchange, Chaewon was forced to become the laboratory's subordinate and hunt down the escaped mutants, especially Gio. That painful truth devastated G.O. For all this time, he had believed that his friends had escaped safely alongside him. But in reality, he was the only one who had truly gained freedom from the laboratory. From that moment onward, G.O. finally strengthened his resolve. He no longer wanted to keep running away while watching the people around him suffer because of Hermes' laboratory. Now Gio had decided to fight back and put an end to all of the suffering. With Haya-in's help, he intended to destroy Hermes' laboratory and free the friends who were still trapped inside. After returning home, Gio began to see a completely different side of Song-hee in that he had never known before. Unlike the strict and intimidating person she appeared to be while working, Hai-in transformed into a caring and affectionate older sister whenever she was at home with Haya-ji. While keeping Gio under her supervision, Hai-in began testing the abilities he possessed. The first test involved a hand grip strength device, and the results showed that Gio's physical strength was far beyond that of an ordinary human. After that, Haya-in used her telekinetic powers to launch attacks at Gio from multiple directions as a way to test his reflexes and self-control. However, the results surprised even Hai-in herself. According to her, avoiding even a single attack would already be extremely difficult for a normal person. Yet, Gio was somehow able to predict nearly all of her attack patterns and dodge them using extraordinary instincts. Even so, Hai-in could not reveal too much about her own mutation abilities because information regarding those powers was considered a state secret. The only advice she could give Gio was to start learning how to properly control his abilities. Haya-in did not want Gio's powers to accidentally harm civilians or endanger the people around him in the future. Since Gio was now officially under her supervision, Hai-in temporarily took on the role of his guardian. She then gave Gio a new mission: to live the life of a normal teenager. Haya-in wanted Gio to learn how to blend into society while secretly gathering information about Hermes' laboratory and the whereabouts of his other friends. For the very first time in his life, Gio finally began experiencing the school life he should have had years ago. Together with Hyeji and Taegu, Gio slowly started learning what a normal teenage life felt like. Even though his life had been filled with nothing but experiments and torture inside the laboratory, all the knowledge and information he had secretly studied during those years unexpectedly helped him adapt. Because of that, Gio was able to keep up with school lessons and daily student life without falling too far behind his classmates. Little by little, Gio finally began to experience the meaning of the life that had been stolen from him for so long. Meanwhile, another mutant named Kang Do-young appeared, one of Gio's old friends who had also come from Hermes' laboratory. At the moment, Do-young was carrying out a mission to retrieve money belonging to the laboratory that had been stolen by mutant trafficking brokers. Do-young possessed an ability called the Heart of Rock, a power that made his body as hard as stone and granted him extraordinary durability in battle. Just like Chaewon before him, Do-young was now working as an operative for Hermes' laboratory. His role was to hunt down traitors, eliminate anyone who caused problems for the laboratory, and ensure that all of Hermes' dirty operations remained under control. Unlike Gio, who was still trying to hold on to his humanity, Do-young seemed to have completely sunk into the dark world of the laboratory. Now, without Gio realizing it, another one of his former friends had returned, not as an ally but as a new threat sent by Hermes' laboratory. A week had passed since Gio began living his new school life. Little by little, he started getting used to living normally alongside Hyeji and Taegu. One day, while walking together with his friends, Gio noticed a man in miserable condition crawling by the side of the road. Without realizing who the man truly was, Gio immediately felt sorry for him and offered him food so he could recover. That man was actually Kang Do-young. However, because Gio's appearance had completely changed, Do-young failed to recognize him. As a gesture of gratitude, Do-young gave Gio some money he had recently obtained after brutally dealing with a group of brokers who had betrayed Hermes' laboratory. But not long afterward, Do-young's bag was suddenly stolen by a pickpocket. Wanting to help, Gio immediately chased after the thief. However, Taegu quickly warned him to be careful and not use his mutant abilities in front of too many people. Unfortunately, the chase failed because the commotion they caused began attracting attention from nearby citizens. Meanwhile, Do-young had already arrived at the thieves' hideout ahead of them. The moment the thieves returned, they were immediately cornered and beaten mercilessly by Do-young. There, the power of his Heart of Rock ability was fully revealed. Do-young could manipulate the earth and stones around him, shaping them into weapons or objects however he wished. At the same time, Hai-in began receiving reports regarding the next wanted target. When she opened the file, it revealed that the person being pursued was Kang Do-hyung, now living under the new identity of Kang Dong-wook. Even more shocking, Do-hyung had become the CEO of a construction company secretly affiliated with Hermes Laboratory. At first, Geo did not immediately realize that the target was Do-hyung because his appearance had changed so much compared to his days inside the laboratory. However, the moment Geo saw a photo of Do-hyung using the Heart of Rock ability, he finally became certain that it was truly his old friend. To carry out Hye-in's mission, Geo and Taegu infiltrated Do-hyung's construction company by disguising themselves as ordinary workers. Taegu, who was extremely excited because he felt like he was participating in a real spy mission, quickly found himself struggling to keep up with Geo's mutant-level physical abilities. Even so, Taegu still helped by gathering information from the other workers at the construction site. Not long later, Do-hyung arrived at the project area alongside his subordinates. Without wasting time, Geo immediately expressed his desire to work at the company. Of course, his true goal was to keep a close watch on Do-hyung. However, getting accepted into the company was not as easy as expected. Because Geo remembered Do-hyung's personality from the past, he tried attracting his attention by reorganizing the worksite materials to create safer and more efficient pathways. Geo even reminded him that back in Hermes Laboratory, Do-hyung once taught him that an efficient work system could prevent people from getting hurt. Hearing that explanation, Do-hyung became interested in Geo, who seemed to share the same mindset as him. In the end, Do-hyung accepted Geo as a temporary trainee worker. However, the arrival of Geo and Taegu immediately made the other workers unhappy. They intentionally started causing trouble in hopes of forcing them out of the company. Eventually, Taegu lost his patience and challenged one of the senior workers to stop bothering Geo. The senior accepted the challenge and invited Taegu to an arm wrestling match. Unfortunately, Taegu had no idea that his opponent was far stronger than him. In order to protect Geo from getting dragged into more trouble, Taegu endured all the humiliation and rough treatment alone. Just as Taegu was about to lose completely, Geo finally stepped in and took his place. Without knowing Geo's true strength, the senior workers mocked him and even intended to injure him worse than Taegu. But the situation instantly reversed. Geo effortlessly broke one of the senior workers' arms, causing the man to collapse while screaming in agony. Seeing this, the other workers became furious and rushed to gang up on Geo. But with his overwhelming strength, Geo defeated all of them by himself. The chaos finally stopped when Do-hyung appeared. Seeing all of his workers defeated by a single high school student, Do-hyung immediately became furious and beat his own subordinates for disgracing themselves. Even so, as their boss, Do-hyung still could not accept the fact that Geo had seriously injured his men. On the other hand, Geo also could not accept that they had bullied Taegu until he got hurt. When Geo said, "If we just stay silent, nothing will ever change," those words instantly awakened old memories inside Do-hyung from their time in Hermes Laboratory. Because of that, Do-hyung finally decided to accept Geo and Taegu as permanent workers to replace the employees injured during the fight. However, after everything was over, Do-hyung secretly called Geo aside and brought him down to an underground area beneath the construction site. Because the work there was highly confidential, the activities were only carried out early in the morning before the other workers arrived. Once underground, Geo discovered a long tunnel filled with massive barrels. Do-hyung warned him that the work was a company secret and ordered Geo not to speak about it to anyone. Geo's only task was to move the barrels to designated locations. But after Do-hyung left, Geo secretly opened one of the barrels to check its contents. The moment he saw the liquid inside, Geo immediately felt something familiar. It was the same chemical substance frequently used during experiments inside Hermes' laboratory. At that moment, Geo realized a horrifying truth. This construction company was secretly supplying chemicals to Hermes' laboratory, and Kang Do-hyung was the one managing the entire operation. Meanwhile, Do-hyung had been monitoring Geo's every movement through CCTV cameras. From the way Geo moved and reacted to the chemicals, Do-hyung began suspecting that Geo might also be a mutant. To confirm his suspicions, Do-hyung secretly ordered his subordinates to beat Geo and test the extent of his regenerative abilities. And if his suspicions turned out to be true, Do Young intended to kill Go himself. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to support the channel by leaving a like and subscribe. Every bit of support helps the channel grow and allows me to continue bringing you the best manhwa, manga, manhwa, and anime recaps. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.